Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parabram, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Dhyanamoolam Guru Murti. पूजामूलं गुरुपदं मन्त्रमूलं गुरुवाक्य मोक्षमूलं गुरुकृपा. Shalom friends, today we will be discussing chapter 3rd onward of Upasna Khand, that is becoming quiet on dissolution. So in this chapter Valmiki ji is describing the royal assembly. In this manner, Ram passed the long night with his lengthy series of reflections, eagerly awaiting eagerly awaiting dawn, like a lotus longing for the rising sun at daybreak. Gradually, the stars faded away at the appearance of the rising morning light in the east. The face of the sky became dimly pale before it was washed over with the white of twilight. The beating of morning drums and the alarms of trumpets roused Ram from his thoughts. He rose with his moon-like face blooming like a full-blown lotus in its leafy bed. He performed his morning ablutions and then joined his brother and a few attendants to go to the hermitage of sage Vasishtha. Having arrived there, they found the sage entranced in his meditation in his lonely solitude. From a respectful distance, they lowly bent down their heads before him. After making their obeisance, they waited on him in the compound until the twilight of morning brought daylight over the face of the sky. The hermitage thronged with princes and chiefs, saints, sages, and Brahmins, as if the celestials were gathered for a meeting in the highest heaven of Brahma. The abode of Vasishtha was full of people, and the crowds of cars, horses, and elephants waiting outside made it equal in grandeur to a royal palace. After a while, the sage rose from his deep meditation and gave suitable reception to the assembled throng that bowed down before him. Then Vasishtha, accompanied by Vishwamitra and followed by a long parade of munis and other men, came out of the hermitage and got into a carriage, sitting down in the manner of the lotus-born Brahma sitting on his lotus seat. He arrived at Dasharata's palace, which was surrounded by a large army. Then he got down from his car as when Brahma descends from his highest heaven to the city of Indra, attended by the entire host of celestials. He entered the grand court hall of the king and was saluted by courtiers, lowly bending down before him, just as when a stately gander enters a bed of lotuses amid a body of aquatic birds. The king also got up and descended from his high throne, then advanced 3 paces barefoot to receive the venerable sage. Then entered a large collection of chiefs and princes, with groups of saints, sages, Brahmins, and Hotri and Potri. Next came the minister Sumantra and others, with the learned Pandit Somya and others. Ram and his brothers followed with the sons of royal ministers. Next came the ministerial officers, the ministerial priests, and the principal citizens, with bodies of the Malwa wrestlers and servants of all orders, and townsmen of different professions. All these took their respective seats and sat in the proper order of their rank. They kept looking intently on sage Vasishtha with uplifted heads and high eyes. The murmur of the assembly was hushed, and the eulogist's recitations stopped. Greetings and conferences were at an end, and there ensued a still silence in the assembly. Winds blew sweet fragrance upward from the cups of full blown lotuses and scattered the sweet dust of their filaments in the spacious hall. Clusters of flowers hung about the hall, diffusing their scents all around. The entire court hall seemed to be sprinkled with perfumes of all sorts. Queens and princesses sat at the windows to see the assembly in the outer hall. They sat upon their couches in the inner apartment, which was spread over the floors. They saw everything by the light of the sun, which shining through the lattice work of the windows. They also saw by the radiance of the gems sparkling on their delicate bodies. Attendant women remained silent without waving their fans or cowries. The earth was sown with orient pearls by dawning sunbeams, and the ground was covered with flowers glistening at the sunlight. Light locusts didn't descend upon them, thinking them to be sparks of fire, but kept hovering in the midway sky as if the body of a dark and moving cloud. Respectable people sat in mute wonder to hear the holy lectures of Vasishtha, because agreeable advice derived from the society of the good is beyond all estimation. Spiritual masters, Vidyadhars, saints, Brahmins, and respectable men gathered from all sides of the sky and forests and from all cities and towns. They gathered around with about Vasishtha and saluted him in silence because deep veneration is naturally mute and lacking in words. The sky was covered with golden dust, carried by fluttering bees from the cups of the starch like lotuses where they had been enclosed at night. Soft airs blew and tinkling sound of ringing bells hanging on strings in the doorways of houses. The morning breeze was now blowing with the fragrance of various flowers, mixing with the perfume of sandal paste, and making bees fly and flutter on all sides with their sweet humming music. With this, chapter third, the description of the royal court comes to an end, and in the next chapter, Dasharata prays and Rama asks Vashishtha to continue is there. Valmiki ji is continuing. Then King Dasarath made this speech to the chief of sages, speaking in a voice that sounded like a deep cloud and in words equally graceful as they were worthy of confidence. Dasharatha ji is speaking. Venerable sage, your speech of yesterday speaks of your intellectual light. It reveals that you have overcome all afflictions by your extremely emancipating austerities. Yesterday's words have delighted us by their discernment and gracefulness, as if by a shower of enlivening ambrosia. The pure words of the wise are as cooling and edifying to the inner soul as clear and nectar like moonbeams. They both serve to cool and dispel the gloom of the earth. The good sayings of great give the highest joy, resulting from imparting a knowledge of the Supreme and by immediately dispelling the gloom of ignorance. The knowledge of the inestimable gem of our soul is the best light that we can have in this world. The learned man is like a tree covered by the vines of reason and good sense. The sayings of the wise serve to purge our improper desires and doings as moonbeams dispel the thick gloom of the night. Your sayings, O sage, serve to lessen our desires and greed, which chain us to this world just as autumn winds diminish the black clouds in the sky. Your lectures have made us perceive the pure soul in its clear light, as the eye slave of antimony makes a man born blind see pure gold with his eyes. The mist of worldly desires that has covered the atmosphere of our mind is now beginning to disperse by the autumn breeze of your sayings. Your sayings of sound wisdom, O great sage, have poured a flood of pure delight into our souls, just as the breezy waves of nectar like wet water, or the breath of mandara flowers infuse into the heart. O my Ram, those days spent attending on the wise are truly cheerful. Otherwise, the rest of the days of one's lifetime are indeed dark and dismal. O my lotus eyed Ram, ask now what more you need to know about the imperishable soul, as the sage is favorably disposed to tell you everything. Valmiki ji is saying. After the king had ended his speech, the venerable and high-minded sage Vasishtha, who was seated before Ram, addressed him. Vasishtha said, O Ram, the moon of your rays, do you remember all that I have told you so far? Have you reflected on the meaning of my sayings from first to last? Do you recollect, O victor of your enemies, the subject of creation and its division into the triple nature of goodness and all, and their subdivision into various kinds? Do you remember what I said regarding the one in all and not as the all, and the one reality ever appearing as unreality? Do you retain in your mind the nature and form of the Supreme Spirit that I have expounded to you? Do you, O righteous Ram, who is deserving of every praise, bear in your mind how this world come to appear from the Lord, God of all? Do you fully retain in your memory the nature of illusion and how it is destroyed by the efforts of the understanding? And how the infinite and eternal appears as finite and temporal in this space and time? Do you, O blessed Ram, keep in your mind that the man is no other than his mind? As I have explained to you by proper definition and arguments, have you, Ram, considered well the meanings of my words? And did you reflect in your mind at night yesterday's reasoning? It is by repeated reflection in the mind and learning by heart what you have learned that you derive the benefit of your learning, and not by negligently laying it aside. You are a proper receptacle for learning only when you retain a rational discourse and a holy sermon like brilliant pearls in the chest of your capacious and reasoning breast. Valmiki said. Ram, being thus addressed by the sage, the valiant progeny of the lotus-seated Brahma, found his time to answer him in the following manner. Now listen to the Ram's reply. O sage, who is acquainted with all scriptures and creeds, you have expounded sacred truths to me. I have, O noble sage, fully comprehended their meaning. I have deposited everything that you said verbatim in the casket of my heart. I have well considered the meaning of your words during the stillness of my sleepless night. Your words, like sunbeams, dispel the darkness of the world. Your radiant words of yesterday delighted me like the rays of the rising sun. O great sage, I have carefully preserved the substance of all your previous or past lectures in my mind, as one preserves the most valuable and brilliant gems in a safe. What accomplished man is there who will not bear on his head the blessings of admonitions so very pure and holy, and so very charming and delightful at the same time? We have shaken off the dark veil of the ignorance of this world and have become as enlightened by your favor as autumn days after rain clouds disperse. First, your instructions are sweet and graceful, then they are enlightening in the middle, and then at the end they are sacred by the holiness they confer. Your flowery speech is always delightful to us by the quality of its blooming and unfading beauty, and by virtue of it conferring our lasting good on us. O sage, who is learned in all scriptures, who is the channel of the holy waters of divine knowledge, and who is firm in your protected vows of purity, cleanse us of the impurity of our many sins through your purifying lectures. So, with this chapter 4 also comes to an end. And in the chapter 5, there is lecture on tranquility of the soul and mind. Vashishji said, now listen with attention to the subject of tranquility of your own good. In it you will find the best answers. Ram, know that this world is a continuous illusion, upheld by men of active and passive natures, that is, Rajasic and Tamasic natures. The properties of actions and passions, that is, Rajas, and ignorance, which is Tamas, support this illusionary fabric, like pillars supporting a building. Man born with the sattvic nature of goodness, like yourself, easily lay aside this deep rooted illusion like a snake sloughing off its time worn skin. But wise men of good dispositions and those of the mixed natures of goodness and action always think about the structure of the world and its prior and future states. The understanding of the sinless, enlightened by the light of the scriptures, or improved in the society of man or by good conduct, become as far-sighted as the blazing light of a torch. By one's own analysis, one should try to know the soul in himself. He who doesn't know the knowable soul in himself is no way intelligent. Intelligent, polite, wise, and noble men are said to have a mixed nature of goodness and action in them. That is Rajas and Sat. The best example of such a nature is found, O Ram, in your admirable disposition. Let the intelligent look into the phenomena of the work, and by observing what is true and untrue in it, attach themselves only to the truth. That which was not before and will not be at the end is no reality at all. But what continues in being, both at first and last, is true existence and nothing else. He whose mind is attached to what is not truth, what is unreal, both at first and at last, is either an infatuated fool or a brute animal that can never be brought to reason. The mind makes and stretches out the world in its imagination. Upon a closer investigation, the mind is in nothingness. Ramji said, I have fully persuaded to believe, sage, that the mind is the active agent in this world and is subject to decay and death. But tell me, sage, what are the surest means of guarding the mind from illusion? Because only you are the sun to remove the darkness of Raghu's rays. To this, Vasishta replied, the best way to guard the mind from delusion is first the knowledge of the scriptures. Next is the exercise of dispassion. Then the company of the good, all of which lead the mind towards its purity. The mind filled with humility and holiness should have recourse to teachers who are learned in philosophy. The instruction of such teachers makes a man practice first his rituals, then leads the mind gradually to abstract meditation of the most holy. When the mind comes to perceive by its own thoughts the presence of the Supreme Spirit in itself, it sees the universe spread before it like cooling moonbeams. A man is tossed about like a straw floating on the wide ocean of the world until he finds his rest in the still waters under the coast of reason. Human understanding comes to know the truth when it puts down all its difficulties by means of its reasoning, just as pure water passes over its sandy bed. The reasonable man distinguishes truth from untruth like a goldsmith separating gold from ashes. But the unreasonable are like the ignorant, incapable of distinguishing one from the other. The divine spirit is imperishable once it is known to the human soul. Error can have no access to the soul as long as it is enlightened by the light of the divine spirit. The mind, ignorant of truth, is ever liable to error. But when acquainted with truth, it becomes free from its doubts and is set beyond the reach of error. O you men who are not acquainted with the divine spirit, you bear your souls only for your own misery. But knowing the spirit, you become entitled to eternal happiness and tranquility. How you are lost to your souls? By blending with your bodies. Expand the soul from under the earthly frame, and you will be quite at rest with yourselves. Your immortal soul has no relation to your mortal bodies. Just as pure gold bears no relation to the earthen crucible in which it is contained. The divine spirit is distinct from the living soul. Just as the lotus flower is separate from the water which upholds it, and like a drop of water is unattached to the lotus leaf on which it rests. My living soul is crying to that spirit with my arms uplifted, but it pays no heed to my cries. The mind is of a gross nature and resides in the shell of the body like a tortoise dwelling in its hole. It is illogically intent upon its sensual enjoyments and is quite neglectful about the welfare of the soul. It is so shrouded by the impenetrable darkness of the world that neither the light of reason, nor the flame of fire, nor the beams of the moon, nor the gleams of a dozen of zodiacal suns have the power to penetrate into it. But the mind, being awakened from its dormancy, begins to reflect on its own state. Then the mist of its ignorance flies off, like the darkness of the night at sunrise. As the mind reclines itself constantly on the downy bed of its meditation for the sake of its enlightenment, its eye perceives this world to be only a valley of misery. Ram, know that the soul is not stained by its outer covering of the body, just like the sky is unsoiled by the clouds of dust that hide its face, and like the petals of the lotus are untainted by the dewdrops falling upon them at night. As dirt and clay cling to the outside of a gold ornament but cannot pierce inside, so the gross material body is attached outside the soul without touching its inside. Men commonly attribute pleasure and pain to the soul, but they are as separate from it as raindrops and flying dust in the sky are different from each other. Neither the body nor the soul is subject to pain or pleasure, all of which relate to the ignorance of the mind. This ignorance being removed, it will be found that they belong to neither. O Ram, don't take pain or pleasure to your mind, but view them in equal light as you view things in the tranquility of your soul. All the outspreading phenomena of the world that are seen all about us are like the waves of the boundless ocean of divine spirit, like the gaudy tail of the peacock displayed in the sphere of our own souls. The bright substance of our soul presents the picture of creation to us, just as the bright gem casts its glare to no purpose but by its own nature. The spirit and the material world are not the same thing. The spirit is the true reality, and the duality of the world is only a representation or counterpart of the spirit. But Brahma is the whole totality of existence, and know that the universe is the expansion of the universal soul. Therefore, O Ram, give up your error of distinguishing one from the another. Ram, there can be no distinction in the everlasting and all extensive fullness of Brahma, just as there is no difference in the water of the wide extended ocean. All things being one and alike in the identical substratum of the Supreme Soul, you cannot conceive of there being any other thing in it, just as you cannot imagine a particle of frost to abide in fire. By meditating on the Supreme Soul in yourself, and by contemplation of the intelligent spirit in your own intellect, you will find the glory of the Supreme Spirit shining brightly in your pure spirit. Therefore, ease your mind, O Ram, and know that there is no mistake or error in believing the all is one, and there is no new birth or newborn being. All is ever existent in the Supreme. Ease yourself, O Ram, by knowing that there is no duality and that there is no opposite of things, except their oneness in the divine unity. Then, knowing yourself as a spiritual being situated in the purity of divine essence, you shall have no need of meditation or adoration. Knowing that you are not separated from God, forsake all your sorrow. Be tolerant, composed, and even minded. Remain tranquil, silent, and meek in your mind. Be as a rich jewel shining with your own internal light. Thus you will be freed from the feverish vexation of this worldly life. Be rational, dispassionate, and calm in your desire. Remain sober minded and free from ardent expectations. Rest satisfied with what you get of your own lot in order to be free from the feverish heat of the worldliness. Be unimpassioned and unperturbed with earthly cares. If you will be free from the fever of heat of this world, be pure and sinless, and neither be stingy nor extravagant. Be free from all anxiety or harm by obtaining that good which the world cannot give, and which satisfies all our earthly wants. Have this super mundane bliss, O Ram, and be as full as the ocean and free from the feverish cares of this world. Be loosened from the net of your loose desires and wipe off the ointment of delusive affections from your eyes. Let yourself rest satisfied with yourself and be free from the feverish anxieties of the world. With your spiritual body reaching beyond unbounded space and rising above the height of the highest mountain, be free from the feverish and petty cares of life. You must be free from the fear of life by enjoying what you get and asking nothing of anybody anywhere. and by your charity rather than your lack and asking. Enjoy the fullness of your soul in yourself like the sea, and contain the fullness of your joy in your own soul like the full moon. Be self sufficient with the fullness of your knowledge and inner bliss. Knowing this world as unreal, as an optical illusion, no wise man is misled to rely on its untruthful scenes. So, you Ram, who is knowing and not deluded and is same, sound headed and of enlightened understanding, must always be charming with your perfect ease from sorrow and care. Now, Ram, rule over this unrivaled kingdom as directed by your sovereign father and manage well everything under your own inspection. This kingdom is filled with every blessing, and the rulers are all loyal to their king. Therefore, you must not omit doing what is your duty or be elated with your happy lot of royalty. So, with this, chapter 5th also comes to an end, and I think we should rest today's session here itself. This we are able to complete, of course, by the grace of Lord Ram, and we will again meet with the reading of next chapter 6 onwards of this Upasna Khand. Until then, Shivoham, friends.